When it comes to walking through inner healing, what do you do with discerning if God wants to heal something in you or if it's something in you that doesn't belong and it needs to die?
That's a good question, Rachel.
Because the Bible talks about putting to death the old nature, that would be a continual thing that we would do. It talks about working out our salvation with fear and trembling. It talks about dying to self. I know that the word gives us a lot about sacrifice, about what Jesus did for us, but about our part in that too. I have walked out many years of healing of the deep wounds. So God going into the deep things in me that needed healing, whether that was father wounds, whether that was identity wounds, whether that is physical, abuse, emotional healing, spiritual healing, where he realigns how we view him.
Yeah.
Where we get ourselves basically back to who he created us to be, and we know who we are in him. And through that journey, we experience a depth of his love that we've never had before, right?
Absolutely.
We experience the Father's heart. That is what touches the deep wounds.
Yeah.
But I remember distinctly after probably 10 years of inner healing and coming through all of that work, I had hit against something that was not getting healed. And I was wrestling with God. And I was asking him, because you do this when you walk through healing with Abba. You ask him these tough questions. And I said, God, I don't understand. I feel this deep wound in me. I feel like I have asked you to go to it and to heal it. And I don't feel like it's being healed. It's still there. You ever had that where you're just like, this is still there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I remember this was the first time ever, but I recognize now what it was for. He said, this is not something I'm going to heal. This is something that needs to die. And I went, what? When things hurt and when they're traumatic and when they hold big memories and when they hold big meaning for us in our life, sometimes it's really, really hard to have God say to you, I'm not actually going to transform and redeem that. That actually needs to go to the cross. I need to kill that for you. And it was something he actually needed to kill for me. I was waiting for him to fill up a hole in me that he actually said is not a hole that he made. He was never going to fill it. He actually needed to get rid of it. What happens when God says that kind of thing to you? Where does that take you?
Well, I know for me, and I've heard this before, and I think honestly too, the first time I actually ever heard someone say, oh, that needs to be killed in you, or there needs to be a death of something. When I first heard that, I used to think that, oh, that's kind of mean, God. Like, I don't think that's you. That's really
God never kills.
Kind of harsh. You're he wants to deal with certain things, maybe even of our old nature, because they keep us bound. They don't keep us free. But it comes from a deep, powerful place of love and freedom.
And you're so right, because I never saw it until a little bit later, that what he was saying there in that moment was actually a course correction for me, right? It was him literally saying, I have your best in mind. This is not your best.
Yeah.
So this needs to go so that you can get to my best.
Yeah. And it's like, and that's a good picture, Rachel, because that's a very loving picture. So it really kind of sheds more understanding on what sometimes when we hear that in the body of Christ, that needs to die or that should be killed, it's because of the power and the magnitude of his love. And he doesn't want us to live out of the old nature, and he doesn't want us to maybe operate in things that he hasn't called us to operate in. So maybe sometimes those things have to die. But I think the beautiful picture is because he has something better for us. It's like It reminds me of a picture of, there was a painting once of a child, and it's like the child had to give up this little bear to Jesus, had to give this little bear. But Jesus had this giant, beautiful bear hiding behind his back, and he wanted to give this child this beautiful big bear, but that child had to give and had to let go of something that was maybe important to them, or they thought was really important to them, or had held value, or that God said, no, that's something I really need you to give me.
So that I can give you something
So I can
better.
give you something better. So his best is always, he always has his best for us when he does that.
He does.
And I think for me, I think it's been an eye-opener because, I remember in the church sometimes hearing that word or hearing someone else say someone to someone else, well, that needs to die. And I used to think, I don't get that, God. Like, I feel it's kind of mean. But when we look at the heart of Papa and we look at the heart of God, it's always because he has something redemptive, something better for you.
Yeah. Well, I wonder sometimes too, this is just a question coming to mind. Does he want those things out of the way in us if they're actually holding us back?
Absolutely.
If they've become walls, if they've become a block, if they've become a lie and a mindset. Like for me, there have been things like this that I've gotten so embedded into and rooted into that I fully believed it was mine, it was part of me, it was identity, it was,
Did you even think it was your nature?
I think I even thought it was my nature. It's hard when it comes up against the things that we literally and legitimately believe belong to us, that are ours, right? The things that we say, oh, I'm wired this way. Oh, that's how I naturally operate. I've had a lot of those in my life where I've said, in all honesty, I've probably said, you know what, God, you made me this way. And sometimes, quite frankly, he has to correct me and say, no, I didn't.
Yeah,
No, I didn't.
That's so true.
And usually if it's hurting me, and those are the realizations, we can know the love of the Father, but I don't believe we fully experience the full love of the Father until we've known his correction.
I kind of love this conversation because this has always been a great big question mark for me. And it's just something in the last little while that I've been revisiting with the Lord, asking him, well, Lord, what does need to die in me? And him, showing me a couple things, and I gave them to him. And I really see it on the cross as, okay, Lord, you've killed that in me. So that shouldn't operate in me. And the couple things that he showed me is just like old nature, right? The old nature. We're alive in him. He's given us a new nature, a new identity. And it's beautiful to be a daughter and a son of God. And when we have old nature kind of operating, the sin nature is what it is. Then it can be unfruitful, right? It's not going to produce fruit either. It's not going to be fruitful.
And don't you find that that is a constant battle? I think this comes back to some of those scriptures I was kind of referencing where it says in the word that we are to continually, right? Take up our cross daily to follow him, or to continually be killing the old nature, dying to self. It's because God knows that the old nature always keeps coming back to us with the temptation to pick it up again. Yeah. And this is an interesting thought because I have had things that I've laid down voluntarily that I have had the ability to pick back up again. And God has called me on that. And he's called me on it in such a way, and again with the gentle correction of the Father, with the things that you lay down and you keep picking back up. If you actually ask me to take them, you can no longer go back to them and pick them back up. So I started changing some of those things that I just kept coming round the mountain to. I would say, you take it from me.
Yeah. And
when he does and he kills it, it will come back with the temptation, but you'll have that reminder, I think.
No, it's dead.
I have that reminder sometimes where I'm like, wait, that's dead. You literally killed that. I saw that die. I am not going there anymore. And when you do, and you keep pressing through that, it actually is the working out of salvation, like that it working really out of the thing. And all of a sudden you realize the temptations aren't coming anymore. Yeah. They don't have the same power. You're not plagued by it, and you're not even thinking about it anymore, right? It actually does fade.
Freedom too. Freedom. He has the best plan for us. So he's a loving Father that...
Yeah. Well, and
wants us to be free.
Yeah, it's so good to know. And this again comes from experiencing him as our dad, as our papa. It's so good to know that when these are the hard things he asks of us, when he does say that something needs to die, when he does ask us to lay down something, maybe something that we've held close
and maybe
for a really long time.
Maybe it could be a dream, but it's not his dream for you. I know that he
something we love.
Yeah, something that we love sometimes,
or we think we love.
Yeah.
These are hard ones, right? These are hard ones. These are good ones though, because it's knowing that he has our best in mind that will actually get us past the hurt of the correction. Because it does. When he says something has to die, it hurts. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It does. We don't want to let things go very often. I have, in all honesty, had things in my life where I have built up such a strong fortress, usually of lies, but it's become so strong and so evident in how it works in my life that I believe it. I believe it to be truth. And I am so rooted in that I had no idea it was not good for me until he said it needs to fall. And it would come as such a shock. It would, because I thought I was in the right place. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought what I was believing was truth. But when he brings that correction, it's for freedom. Just like you said, it is always for freedom. It's for our best. It's because he doesn't want us hindered by those things anymore. He doesn't want them hurting us anymore.
That is a good father.
It's a good father.
Yeah, that's a good father.
And that is who he is for us. And this is where I think he actually does marry together the healing, the deep healing of actual wounds alongside the letting go of false and old and the things that are hurting us from the inside. He marries those two so that we actually can walk in full, complete healing. Because one without the other is not enough.
That makes sense. Yeah. That's true.
I can't honestly live completely under just Father's affection and God's love and grace and mercy without his correction and his rebuke, or it will not be love.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's very biblical that the father disciplines his children. But he's such a good father. Like, again, I always feel like even when I get the nudges or the little, like, that's probably not very good for you to do, those things, he's such a good father. And he wants us to be free, to be blessed, and to bless others.
Yeah. And it's a hard one. You mentioned dreams. And I'll share this because this is a vulnerable story for me, but it's an important one because I gave a lot of my life to it. And when something comes your way, and for me, this was a person. I was newly into deliverance, freedom, healing, and identity, but I was fresh. I was still a baby. And I wanted more than anything to be married. I wanted to be with someone. I was tired of being lonely, having to fight through life alone. I met a guy, and it was one of those immediate, instant, it hit me in my stomach, kind of gut punches of, ugh. And then someone that I know and respect dropped the hint of him, the possibility of him into my mind, and it sparked something. And I'm not going to lie. I mean, this is, I think, totally natural. It's totally human, right? A dream was born. I only met him probably a handful of times in my actual life, and the extent of our conversation was probably about 4 minutes worth. But over the course of almost 7 years, I fantasized. I believed he was the one for me. I believed God was taking me there, and maybe it wasn't the right time. I was holding on to this thing with everything that I had. And I was getting so disappointed and so disillusioned by the amount of time that was going by and how much it actually hurt me. And my journal was filled with these angsts and arguings with God, and I poured out my heart about this, and I poured out my dreams about this. And looking back, I actually realized that God answered me in my journals. But he didn't actually answer me directly about this guy. He just kept promising that one day it would come and he had a plan for my life and love would happen. And I didn't recognize that for what it was. But I remember distinctly, I had literally invested my heart and soul into this dream, so much so that almost everything I did was based on the possibility of it. Everything that I was believing was based on the belief that it was happening or that it was going to come.
Yeah.
And one day God stopped me in my tracks and he said, "You need to let it go." And I thought God was being brutal.
Yeah.
Because I thought that this guy was God's promise.
Yeah.
And I realize as I'm even saying this, all of this was based on what I thought.
Yeah.
And I was wrong. And God stopping me was not to be mean, but he recognized how far I had gone in something that was not doing me any good, and it wasn't going to go anywhere. It was unfruitful.
Yeah, it'd be unfruitful.
It was unfruitful. And he stopped me because he went, "I can't stand to see you hurting yourself like this anymore." And this is where this question has kind of come from in me a lot of the time, is the wound that I'm feeling of my own making, or is it one that he actually wants to heal? It's kind of a secondary question to what we're talking about. But sometimes I recognize that my own hurting is of my own hand.
Yeah.
And that is where I need God's correction to be able to tell me that I need to let it go, because he sees that it's hurting me even when I can't.
And I think, see, again, that's a beautiful picture. It's such a good testimony, Rachel, because I think it really will heal some of you out there, and even me, you know, just listening to this, of some of those things, maybe dreams or desires that don't line up with the Lord's desires. When he does place certain desires in us, I feel like those desires that he places in us come back. They'll come back. He'll highlight them. They'll keep coming back because they're in us. Like they're these kingdom desires that they're true. But then there's things that just aren't, and that we hold on to that aren't good for us. And that is such a good testimony, just to show the love of God and how this is not good for you, and he has so much better for you and waiting for you.
And waiting
for you. And so, because he has the best in store for us. So when we do, and I love this because I never really always looked at that question with God's understanding before. And I feel like,
me neither.
And this is just something that we just really want to bring to you, is greater understanding on what does it mean, like if we need to kill something, or if something needs to die in our life. That's a very good picture. Yeah, of something that was false and it wasn't for us.
Yeah, was hurting us. It seems in Scripture, because God's the greatest storyteller, that every story that looks like he's being harsh or mean or withholding, I will be honest, I have railed at God and literally shaken my fist at him for withholding something from me. And I later learned it was never him. And that was such an incredible humbling, because it is never him being mean for the sake of being mean.
No.
When he was harsh, when he was even violent, when he demonstrated his wrath and anger, especially in the Old Testament, if you look at it again from his perspective, right, we start to see that it's because he sees full picture, because he knows what's best for us and where we're going. So we don't see that. That is why those things are in place. So often the harshness of God's nature is what we perceive, but his side of it is actually the full picture of love.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's not harsh at all, but he does. Word promises that he does rebuke us like a father, because we need it, and because that's what loving fathers do. If we are able to see it from that perspective, our healing can go so much deeper, and I honestly believe sometimes it can go so much faster. because we're not in our own way.
And I feel too, I think it brings so much more understanding to us as the body, right? Because listening to your testimony, Rachel, I feel like gives me more understanding. I know what you mean when you say, I want to kill this, or this isn't for you. This needs to go to the cross.
Yeah.
I understand it in a greater way. Like it has more...
It has more weight.
And it has life, right? Because what he gives us, because he wants to bless us, and he wants us to be blessed.
Yeah.
It's like that, I don't know, it's just a beautiful thing, like to be alive in his nature and not to be ruled by the old nature, the sin nature too, or the desires of the world, but...
And to even then have the ability to believe every promise that God has for us, so of his blessing and his abundance. Because that picture of the little kid holding on to his teddy bear, not recognizing the bigger blessing that's to come, I've done that. Sometimes it's not really super big things, but we are holding a blessing God's given us, and we're like, that's all I've got. I've got to hold on to this for the rest of my life. And God's going, actually, I've got something bigger. If you're willing to let that go now, I could give you this better thing. And even something as small as that, now we are, with a little bit more understanding, like you said, we're able to now smooth a path. We're leveling the road ahead of us to be able to walk more fully into these things like full healing, like restoration, like blessing, like his love.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all of that.
And then we can be blessed to bless others as well, and we can be free, right? Truly walking in freedom out of the new nature, and it's such a... I know we're going from glory to glory, so that's a beautiful thing.
Yes, what an amazing conversation. Thanks.
This is a great conversation. Thanks for being so vulnerable and sharing that story, Rachel. Yeah.
And thanks for joining us on this conversation. We hope you'll join us next time.
Yeah, thank you.
If you have questions, if anything was not clear, if you want to know more, please leave us a comment below.
Yeah, we'd love to hear.